This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Abam, welcome everyone. Good evening. So Parshas Toldos. The pasuk says, Akev asher shama Avraham Mikoili. Because Avraham listened to my voice, Vayishmar Mishmarti, he kept my guard, Mitzvosai, my commandments, Chukoisai, my statutes, V'soiroisai, and my Torahs. So, what do you mean my Torahs? There's only one Torah. What does it mean that Avraham kept the Torahs? There's only one Torah. B'chlal, the word Akev is a very interesting word. What does Akev mean? It says Akev because. But usually, if you wanted to say because, it could say Mishum, B'shvil, Beglal. What's Akev? Akev, the heel? Why does the Torah say Akev asher shama Avraham Mikoili? So there's an amazing Gemara. The Gemara in Masechta Yuma, Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph says, Amar Rav, Kiyem Avraham Avinu, Kol HaTorah Kula, Avraham Avinu was Mekayim, the whole Torah, everything. He kept everything. Shenemar, Akev Asher Shama Avraham Mikoili, because Avraham listened to my voice. So Gemara asks, how do you know Avraham kept the whole Torah? Maybe he only kept some of the Torah. Amar le Rav Simi Bar Chiel Rav. Rav Simi Bar Chiel said, Rav Ema Sheva Mitzvos. How do you know Avraham kept the whole Torah? Maybe he only kept the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. You know, he listened to my voice. Okay. Hashem never told him to keep the Torah, so maybe he only kept the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. So Gemara says, no. Obviously he kept more than Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach because he did Milah. So once he did the Milah, and of course the Sheva Mitzvos Mustami, he kept all 613. So Gemara says, no, maybe just Milah and the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. Ve'ima Sheva Mitzvos Milah. So Gemara says, no, that can't be. Because then what's Mitzvosai V'soiroisai? What does that come to include? So therefore, Amar Rav, V'itemer Rav Ashi, Kiyem Avram Avinu Afilu Eruve Tavshilin. Then Avram Avinu kept everything. He kept the Iraisas, he kept the Rabbanans, he kept everything. He even kept Eruve Tavshilin. Okay. It's interesting that of all the things that we could say that Avram kept, we say Avram kept everything, even Erev Tavshilin. Like, why are we picking on Erev Tavshilin? It's amazing. Baal HaTurim says, how do Chazal know Erev Tavshilin? Baal HaTurim says, the gematria of Akev Asher Shama Avraham, the numerical value of the words Akev Asher Shama Avraham is the same as Kiyem Af Eruve Tavshilin. Obviously, I'm sure you all picked that up just by looking at the pasuk, right? They say the stipler has, gematrias in the back of the Birchas Peretz. So the stipler said it came to him during Kriyas HaTorah, obviously, So that's what the Baal HaTurim says. The Baal HaTurim says that Chazal see a remez to the Erev Tavshilim in the gematria. In fact, the Baal HaTurim says that the reason why Avraham had an added hey to his name is the 5 added to Avraham's name is Keneged Koili, Mishmarti, Mitzvosai, Chukoisai, V'soiroisai. Actually, the Baal HaTurim says that, and the Medrash says the same thing. We know that we have a tradition that at 3 years old, Avraham recognized HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, by the way, that's not unanimous. The Ramban doesn't say that. The Ramban says older. Some say 40, some say 48, some say 52. But be it as it may, the Baal HaTurim brings down the opinion that Avraham understood HaKadosh Baruch Hu at age 3. And the proof is that Avraham lived 175 years. And Akev is Gematria 172. So for how many years did Avraham keep the Torah? For Akev years, Avraham kept the Torah. For 172 years, Avraham kept the Torah. So I'm looking around. Like, what's this Indian that Avram Avinu kept Erev Tavshilin? Like, why do we pick on Erev Tavshilin? So I saw quoted in many Sfarim that if you look in Shalos Teshuvas Avnei Nezer, he says the following pshat. Now I already knew off the bat, I smelled something here. I smelled a misquote. You could smell a misquote from a mile away. What do you mean it says in the Shalos Teshuvas Avnei Nezer? Which tshuva? Like, why doesn't anybody say which tshuva it is? If you see somebody quote a tshuva and nobody say what tshuva it is, you can almost take it to the bank. They're misquoting it, and the reason why they don't know what tshuva it's in is because it's not in there. So I did a search. If I searched the Shalos Teshuvas Avnei Nezer until I was confident it was not in the Shalos Teshuvas Avnei Nezer. So I'm saying, how could you just blame something on the Avnei Nezer? It must be, there's another collection of Chidushim of the Avnei Nezer So I checked in there, and of course it was in there. So they quote Shalos Chuvas Avnei Nezer because somebody probably once said that Avnei Nezer said it, but nobody ever traced it back. I can't even tell you how many Sfarim quote Shalos Chuvas Avnei Nezer, because the way it goes is the last one quotes the second to last quotes, but you could always trace it back to the first. Anyway, it's in the Sefer Nois Desha. Nois Desha are the Chidushim of the Sachat Shava Rebbe actually, the Avnei Nezer and the Shem Shmo. And the Avnei Nezer says the following Chidush. We once said it over here on a Yom Tov night. The Chidush goes like this. The Ramban says, we know what's an Erev Tavshilin? Erev Tavshilin allows you to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Why? Because you're not to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So the question that's raised, that the Avnei Nezer raises, is why can't you prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos? Yom Tov is more lenient than Shabbos. Shabbos is an Isra Skila. Yom Tov, it's a Lava Aseh. There's no Chi of Misa for violating Yom Tov. You should be allowed to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos. That's the kasha. Why are you not allowed to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos? So there's a Svara in the Ramban that even though Shabbos is more Chomer than Yom Tov, in a way Yom Tov is more Chomer than Shabbos, and that's because the Kedusha of Yom Tov is a man-made Kedusha. Shabbos is Kviya V'Kaima. Shabbos the Kedusha is steady. The Shabbos the Kedusha comes down from Shamayim and then it leaves when Shabbos is over. That's why when Shabbos is up, there's nothing you could do to hang on to the Kedusha. There's no Isru Shabbos. That's why you have to smell B'samim when Shabbos is over, because the second Shabbos is over, the Kedusha vanishes. But Yom Tov you don't smell B'samim, says Avnei Nezer, because Yom Tov, it's man-made and you can hang on to it. That's why you don't have to smell B'samim. That's why there's a concept of Isru Chag. So since the Kedusha of Yom Tov in one dimension is greater than Shabbos, namely that it's man-made, which is actually, the Ramban says, greater than coming down from Shamayim, therefore you need to make an Erev Tavshilin to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos. But says the Avnei Nezer, that's our Yom Tov in one dimension is more Chomer than Shabbos. But what about Avraham Avinu's Yom Tov? Avraham Avinu's Yom Tov in general is more lenient than Shabbos, and Avraham Avinu's Yom Tov is not a man-made Kedusha, because there's no Klal Yisrael yet. So Avraham Avinu's Yom Tov is only the Ribbon Shalom making it Yom Tov. So Avraham Avinu's Yom Tov is like a Shabbos, but Shabbos is more Chamor. So Taka for Avraham Avinu, he didn't have to make Erev Tavshilin. There's no Inyan for Avraham Avinu to make Erev Tavshilin. The whole reason we make Erev Tavshilin is because Yom Tov has one advantage over Shabbos, that it's man-made, but Avraham Avinu's Yom Tov was not man-made. Therefore, Avraham Avinu didn't even need to make Erev Tavshilin. So the Chiddush is, even a D'Rabbanan, that Avraham Avinu didn't need to do, he did it anyway. That's why we pick on Erev Tavshilin, says Avnei Nezer. Okay. What's interesting is that the Medrash seems to have a different interpretation than the Gemara. The Gemara says Avraham Avinu kept even Erev Tavshilin. If you look in the Bereshis Rabbah, look at number 5. Vayishmar mishmarti mitzvoisai chukoisai v'seiroisai Rabbi Yonasan mishum Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu hilchoisei ruvei chatzerois haya Avraham Yodea. Avraham Avinu even kept not Erev Tavshilin, but a ruvei chatzerois. Even a ruvei chatzerois. In fact, the Maratzchios in the Hagois on Masechta Yuma, he brings down that look in the Sefer Reish Yochsin, that he changes the girsa from Eruvei Tavshilin to Eruvei Chatzeros. And somehow he explains that Avraham Avinu is makbid on Erev Chatzeros. Erev Chatzeros somehow is symbolic of the Rebbeinu Shalom's control over the Bria. He doesn't explain. I don't really understand what that means. I'm just telling you his words. But says the Maritz Chios, in my opinion, it's not Erev Tavshilin, and it's not Eruvei Chatzeros. It's Eruvei Techumen. Avraham Avinu even kept Eruvei Techumen. Now, why? From where do Chazal say Eruvei Techumen? Very Parshut. Akev. It says Akev. Why does the pasuk use the lashon of Akev? Akev implies the heel, a mitzvah connected to the heel. What mitzvah is connected to the heel? Eruvei Techumen. In fact, the Gra, quoted in the Sefer Mayana Shel Torah, the Gra says that the original Gersa in the Gemara was Ayin Taf, with 2 streichels. And then you had some Amaratzim printers who read the Ayin Taf as Eruvei Tavshilin, but says the Gra, no, that's not correct. It should be Eruvei Techumen, not Eruvei Tavshilin. Okay, but he kept all 3. Eruvei Tavshilin, Eruvei Chatzeros, and Eruvei Techumen. Yeah.
The Akev Shama that we're starting off, we have it multiple times from that not just we're asking any time it says we're asking.
Well, not necessarily. You have in Parshas Akev, V'haya Akev Tishma'an. There, Akev means reward, right? V'haya and obi Akev, the reward, Tishman, if you listen. But here, it seems like Akev. What does Akev mean even? Like, what does it mean? Sometimes it can mean reward. Does it mean reward here? It wouldn't fit in if it meant reward. It says Hashem gave Eretz Yisrael to Abraham. Akev? Maybe it should say Le Akev.
What do you see it means reward?
And V'haya Akev Tishman.
Why can't you say it means because?
Okay, I didn't want to get into this, but if you look in the Targum on Parshas Akev, Targum says the Taicha is Chalaf, reward. V'haya obi Akev, the reward, Tishman. It doesn't really fit in if it means reward. V'haya and obi Akev, because Tishman, that you listen, it will be because you listen. Now the truth is, what makes this complicated is the Targum on this week's Parsha translates the word Akev the exact same as he does in Parshas Akev, which is Chalaf, reward. So I know I said it can't mean that, and it doesn't mean that. That's what I said in the Shiur. But it's a separate discussion. In other words, how could the Targum say that Akev in this week's Parsha means reward? Okay, that's some of the... In other words, the Targum definitely translates the two Akevs consistently. Whether the Gemara is learning it that way, certainly the Gra doesn't learn the Gemara that way. Okay, but let's leave it at that. So Avram Avinu learned Kol HaTorah Kula. So the question is, who taught him the Torah? Who was his Rebbe? Who taught it to him? Where did he get it from? It's an incredible medrash. The medrash says like this. It says the medrash in Bereshis Rabbah, Parshas Samachalef Ois Aleph, Kiyim b'soras Hashem cheftzoi, ki yedativ laman asher yitzaveh, u'v'soirasa yege Amar Reb Shimon, Av loy limdoi, his father never taught him the Torah, V'rav loy hayaloi, he didn't have a Rebbe. U'mehechan lamad, from where did he learn Torah? Ela zimin loy HaKadosh Baruch Hu shtei kil Yosef. God designated his two kidneys, K'min shnei rabbanim, like two rabbis. God turned his kidneys into rabbanim, and they flowed and they taught him Torah. The Chachma, this is what David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Avarech es Hashem asher ya'atzani. I will bless God that He counseled me, Af leilos yisruni chol yosai. Even in the evening, my kidneys instructed me. So Avram had this inner resource of his kidneys. Is a concept of kloyos yoyatzois. The kidneys could advise. In fact, Avram's kidneys advised him and taught him Torah. I once saw in a sefer from Rabbi Glatstein Ginsburg. He has an English book on bris milos. I remember he writes, there's a kasha that Rabbi Akiva writes in a tshuva that if the father is not around to make the bracha, achnisa bebrisa shel Avram Avinu, the grandfather can make the bracha. Why? Because even though the grandfather is not mitzvah to do milah, but the grandfather is mitzvah to teach Torah, and a kid cannot understand Torah without a milah, because Rabbi Akiva quotes Eilos Ephraim that keneged the arlas habasar is the arlas halev, that by cutting off the foreskin it opens up the heart. So in order to learn Torah you need a milah, and therefore if the grandfather has to teach Torah, the grandfather is mitzvah to give a milah. So he had a kasha, Rabbi Glatstein Ginsburg had a kasha. So Avram Avinu, how did he know Torah before he had a milah? If you can only understand Torah if you have a milah, so how did Avram understand the Torah? So he uses this medrash, I remember, that Avram's kidneys taught him the Torah. Taka, his lave, couldn't teach him, because his lave had an orla. But so, most people, they learn Alidei Libam, and Avram learned through his klayas. Okay. What I really want to share with you tonight is, I think we're all familiar with the concept that the Avos kept the Torah before it was given. So I think one thing we learned from last week is, what do you mean we're all familiar with the concept? Who says it? Yeah, of course the Avos kept the Torah, we all know, I heard, everybody says it. So at least one thing you should get from the Shiurim is, just because everybody says something, it could be true, that's all I'll tell you. Just because everybody says something, it's possible that it's true. So let's examine this. In fact, did Avram Avinu keep the Torah? What does it mean he kept the Torah? Did all the Avos keep the Torah? Did Yitzchak keep the Torah? Did Yaakov keep the Torah? Who taught them the Torah? So we just learned the possibility, his kidneys. But what does it mean even that Avram Avinu kept it? So Rashi, let's start with Rashi. Rashi takes it literally. Rashi says, Avram listened to my voice, the Asar Nisyonos. He kept my Mishmaros, Gzeras D'Rabbanan, Shniyos La'arayos, Shvos L'Shabbos. He kept my Mitzvos. Mitzvos are items that had they not been commanded, then we still would have kept, like Gezela, like Shvichas Damim. He kept my Chukim. These are mitzvahs that the Ummah Ha'olam makas about. And he kept my Torah, Torah Shabbat Torah Shabbat Peh. We're all familiar with Rashi. Rashi takes it, black and white, literally. Avraham kept the Torah. He kept the whole Mishnah Brura, every Shulchan Aruch, every Ramah, every Sif Katan. Comes the Radak. The Radak says it's not true. The Radak says not true. Avram didn't keep the Torah. It's not Pashup Pshat. The Radak says, where does it say Avram kept the Torah? Because he listened to my voice? What did Hashem tell him to do? Tenis Yoinos. He told him to do Bris Milah. So whatever Hashem told him to do, he did. Says Radak, Pashup Pshat is, Kala l'chol mitzvahs ha-seichel ha-meforsamois v'she'enon meforsamois. He kept all the obvious ones. Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So what does it mean? Chukim? Some of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach are chukim. In other words, what you're allowed to do with an animal, revia of an animal, harkavas ho'ilan. The Radak says for a guy to graft a tree, it might be from the Radak's opinion is as part of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. It's a chayk. How would any guy know not to stick an apple into an orange tree? But it's one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So Avram Avinu kept that. But there's no indication necessarily that Avram kept the Torah. Why do you have to say he kept the Torah? Where does it say he kept the Torah? Oh, the Gemara! Okay, that's the Gemara, the Radak says. But it's not what is called Pshutoi Shel Mikra. Now, this is something over years we've explained many times. The Radak is not arguing on the Gemara. Avada, the Gemara is correct. And you must believe in the Gemara. And if you don't believe in the Gemara, you're called a full-fledged heretic apikoros. However, Pshutoi Shel Mikra means there's a level of understanding the Chumash that doesn't come on to the tradition of the Gemara. It doesn't mean you don't accept it. Avada, if you're koifer in it, you're a koifer b'chal Torah kula. It's just there's a level of learning called Pshat. And on the level of Pshat, you don't have to say that Avram Avinu kept the Torah. Avada, he did keep the Torah. And you must be mamen that he kept the Torah. But you don't have to be mamen on, there is a level of understanding Torah, meaning a Jew should believe that there is a way to understand the Torah, there's a way to read the Torah and understand it on a level that it's not necessary to say that Avram kept the Torah, even though he did. We have a tradition he did, Avada, he kept it. But it's not the pshat in the Chumash. Nowhere in the Chumash does it mandate that we accept that Avram kept the Torah. Does it say anywhere he kept the Torah? It says he ate matzahs. It doesn't say that. It says he ate marar. He did, of course he did. We're not denying it. That's how the Radak learns pshat. The Radak even quotes the Gemara. He says, Api drash. The Gemara tells us he kept the Torah. We're not questioning it. We're not challenging it. It's just important to understand. I'll give you a very important mashal. Very often Rashi will say pshat. The Ramban will blow it out of the waters. The Ramban will ask 5 questions on it, and the Ramban will say it's wrong. And you look it up. Rashi got it from the Medrash Rabbah and the Medrash Tanchuma. How could the Ramban say the Medrash is wrong? The answer is the Ramban is not saying the Medrash is wrong. The Ramban is saying it's not pshat. Avada, it's emes and it's drush and it's drash. It's one of the shivim panim. It's one of the 4. Fine. That's a shita of the Radak. There's a Ramban. Probably we're all familiar with the Ramban. Let's review the shita of the Ramban. The Ramban asks on Rashi, really? Avram Avinu kept the whole Torah? Now, it would seem to be substantiated by the fact that when Yosef revealed himself, what did Yosef send back to Yaakov? Agalos. Why? Because the last thing that Yaakov was learning with him, what do you mean learning with him? What do you mean learning with? There's no Torah. Obviously, not only did Abraham know the Torah, Yaakov learned the Torah, Yosef learned the Torah. They went to yeshiva. Just because you go to yeshiva doesn't mean people learn, right? But they did. Okay? They were zakein v'yoshev b'yeshiva. Not only did they learned in the yeshiva. So, but the Ramban has the following question. Ramban's kasha is, by the way, not all the Avos went to yeshiva Shem Be'evar. We find Avram Avinu went to yeshiva Shem Be'evar? No.
He didn't have to. He was
Yitzchak? Yitzchak went to yeshiva Shem Be'evar? I don't think so. Yaakov went to yeshiva Shem Be'evar. Yaakov was Yoshev Oihalim. But Avram was Zakin v'Yoshev b'Yeshiva. Was it Yeshiva Shem Me'ever? I don't know if we have a riot to that. But the Ramban has the following question. The Ramban's kasha is, oh yeah, the Avos kept the Torah, Yaakov made a matzeva. Matzeva is Isser D'Oraisa. It's a lav in the Torah, lo yisakum lecha matzeva, asher sonei Hashem lekach. God hates matzeva. So we're not talking about a matzeva on a kever. We're talking about a monument of service. Yaakov made a matzeva. Yaakov married 2 sisters. You're not married 2 sisters, says Ramban. And according to Chazal, he married 4 sisters. Amram married his aunt. Moshe made 12 matzevos. How in the world could you say that they kept the Torah? Especially if the Torah is saying that Hashem rewards Avraham because Avraham kept the Torah, so even though maybe they didn't have to, but after Hashem tells Avraham, I'm rewarding you because he kept the Torah, you would think the Avos would want to keep the Torah as well. And then the Ramban says, doesn't the Torah say that Hashem loves Avram because he commands his children after him? Now we do find that Yaakov kept Shabbos. It says Yaakov was koivea techumen. Says Ramban, that doesn't mean anything. It could be because since Shabbos is shakal keneged kol Torah kula, they were specifically medakdik in Shabbos. And we do find the Avos gave tzedakah, because we find that Yitzchak measured, and he found how much? Meya sha'arim. And Chazal say, why did he measure? For Meiser. Just because he gave tzedakah doesn't mean he kept the Torah. They were generous people. But says Ramban, in my opinion, the Avos kept kol Torah kula. Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Yaakov married 2 sisters. They only kept the Torah in Eretz Yisrael. You know why? Because who tells you have to keep the Torah? God. Wrong. God never told you have to keep the Torah. Says, you know who tells you have to keep the Torah? Eloikei ha'aretz, the God of Eretz Yisrael. So if you live in Chutz La'aretz, says Ramban. Now this is the Ramban L'Shitase. We have to give a shiur on this Yesod of the Ramban. The Ramban holds keeping Torah mitzvah in Eretz Yisrael is only practice for Eretz Yisrael. There's not a real keeping Torah mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz is only practice for Eretz Yisrael. It's not that you're really fulfilling the Torah in Chutz La'aretz. It's practice if one day you get to Eretz Yisrael. That's the Shita Ramban. Therefore the Ramban says, the Avos never kept the Torah in Chutz La'aretz. Look at Yaakov Avinu. He married 2 sisters, of course, in Haran, outside, michutz, bachutz. You eat kosher? Yisrael I eat kosher. So Yaakov also. Yaakov married 2 sisters, and guess what? He was lucky. One of them died before he got back.
Gzeilas mutter in Chutz La'aretz.
Gzeilas sheva mitzvos v'nei noyach. But the rest of the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu made matzevos Chutz La'aretz. Yaakov made a matzeva in Eretz Yisrael, but says Ramban, the truth is that when it comes to a matzeva, God used to like it, because the pasuk says Asher Sonei. Now I hate it, but once upon a time God liked matzevos, and Yaakov Avinu did it when he was before Hashem hated it. But the shita of the Ramban is that the Avos only kept the Torah in Eretz Yisrael, not in Chutz La'aretz. Chutz La'aretz. You ever find Avram eating matzah in Chutz La'aretz? Eating mar in Chutz La'aretz? No. Chutz La'aretz, you're allowed to talk by Chazar Sashatz, according to the Avos. No, before the Torah was given. Right? What? Shabbos. So the Ramban says that Yosef kept Shabbos in Mitzrayim because Shabbos is shakal keneged kol HaTorah. But the rest of the mitzvahs, they only kept it in Eretz Yisrael. That's the shita of the Ramban. Now there's a Toisus, a very interesting Toisus. Das Ekenim Mibali HaToisus, Parshas Vayeshev. So it says Yosef is lost, and they said Yosef was devoured by a wild animal, and it says all of Yaakov's daughters came to console him. So Toisus asks, what do you mean all of his daughters? He only has 1 daughter, Dinah, yeah? So Toisus brings down, twins were born with each one of the Shvatim, or it means his daughter-in-laws who were Canaanim. So Toisus says, the Avos, the Shvatim married non-Jewish women, the Canaanites? So Toisus says, no, it doesn't mean they were Canaanites. They were merchants. It's a lashon of merchants. But then Toisus asks, they married their sister? But I thought the Avos kept the whole Torah. So listen to a Toisus, you'd flip out. The shita of Toldos is, look, Toldos asks me, Ukasha, Avram Avinu is Mekayim, even heir of Tavshilin. So how could the Shvatim marry their sister? How could Yaakov marry two sisters? Listen to this. V'yesh loymar, ki me'achar shaloi nitztavu ala Torah, since they weren't commanded, masha yeroitzin hayim Mekayim, and masha yeroitzin loy hayim anichin. They kept what they wanted to. And they didn't keep what they didn't want to keep. Like most people. says the Toldos, the Avos did not have to keep the Torah. They did when they wanted to, and when they didn't want to, they didn't. It's like when you say "I always." Always means like at least 1 out of 10 times, right? You ever hear people talk? I always or I usually. Usually means like never. Always means like once in a blue moon, right? So the Avos, they kept the Torah. When? Look at Toldos. Toldos says, Ma shahayu roitzim hayim mekaymin, or ma shahayu roitzim hayim anichin. They kept some and they didn't keep some. Toldos Ashita. Frek Toldos, the Gemara in Avrei Psachim says, that la'asad lavai, but the Suda of la'asad lavai. So you know who's going to be there? Avram and Yitzchak will be there. You know that song? Yaakov and his sons. And Moshe Rabbeinu. So now the question is, who's going to bench? Who's going to bench? So they give the Koshel Bracha to Yaakov. So somebody asked me, they should give it to Moshe. And it doesn't say Aaron was there, so it could be if there's no Kohen, the Levi doesn't have Chashiva. It's Machlokes, but Nisparda HaChavila. But Lamaisa Avraham was a Kohen. There's a sheet that Avraham Avinu had a din of a Kohen Gadol. So maybe, but they offer it to Yaakov, and Yaakov can't do it because he married two sisters. So Frek Toldos, but he was allowed to marry two sisters. So Toldos says, since the Torah was destined to answer it, there will be a little bit of an oynish that he married two sisters. So why did he marry them? He said it's worth it to marry women like Rachel and Leah to build Kaya. It was worth it to do a little avera. Now don't try that at home. Okay? Don't try that at home. Toldos' shita was they kept what they wanted to, they didn't keep what they didn't want to. It was maybe slightly improper, but it was kedai. I would call it was a chumrah not to. So should you keep chumras? The answer is, as long as it's worthwhile. Imagine, I'm going to be machmer. I'm going to lose 3 hours of learning if you're going to be machmer. So now you have to decide if it's worth it or not. So they made a cheshbon. It was kedai to live with two sisters, to build Klal Yisrael. This is not what I'm saying. I'm just telling you Toldos. That's Toldos' shita.
They knew that in the future for them.
They knew the future would be Asur. Yeah, but not for them.
Yeah, for them.
No, not for them. They'll never get the Torah.
No, and they'll get to Eretz Yisrael.
Okay, so the truth is, no, that's the Ramban. The Ramban shita is they only kept the Torah in Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, so what does the Toldos say?
Toldos' shita is they only kept what they wanted to. And what they didn't want to, they didn't keep. Yeah. Now, Lamaisa, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky has a very complex way of understanding the Ramban. I wasn't going to mention, I'll say very quickly. Rabbi Yaakov learns like this. Rabbi Yaakov learns there's no kasha how Yaakov can marry two sisters. You know how he married two sisters? He married Leah because he got tricked. And he married Rachel because he said he would. He told Rachel, I'm going to marry you. Evadcha, Shava Shalom B'Rachel B'Cha. So now he has a shayla. He married Leah. So now he gave Rachel his word. On the other hand, the Torah says he can't marry Rachel. So now he has a big shayla. What's more important? To keep my word? Or to keep some chumrah of following the Torah before it's given? It's more important to be honest than to keep a chumrah, says Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov, so what's the Ramban bothered by? Well, the Ramban is bothered by, why did God have it, why did Hashgacha have it, that Yaakov should be in a matzav of living with two sisters? And the answer is, because Hashem knew that one of them would die before they got back to Eretz Yisrael. There's no kasha on Yaakov. Yaakov, of course, had to marry two sisters. Rachel he married, and Leah he married, and Rachel he said. Says Rabbi Yaakov, what's the inyan of not breaking an engagement? Why are you not to break an engagement? Where does it say? It says, because you committed to marry them. Can't break your word. That's how Rabbi Yaakov learns the chaymer of an engagement. Okay, weiter. Let's go to the Rashba.
Emes Yaakov, right on the
It's an Emes Yaakov, yeah. The Rashba. This Rashba is one of the hardest Rashbas to understand.
What was Rachel's excuse?
Wasn't an excuse.
To give Leah away before herself.
Why was she allowed to?
Yeah.
Now we're up to Toldos, maybe we'll get up to, we'll ponder that for a few weeks. Okay, the Rashba. How could Yaakov Avinu marry two sisters? Says the Rashba, there are three types of mitzvahs. Some mitzvahs are governed by time, some mitzvahs are governed by place, and some mitzvahs are governed by items. Time, Shabbos, Yom Tov. Place, Eretz Yisrael, Beis Hamikdash. Items, Lulav, Esrog. Oh, if you understand that, you'll understand how Yaakov can marry two sisters, obviously. Says the Rashba, Eini Yachal Lefarish Yasar. I cannot explain more. All mitzvahs are governed by either time, place, or item, and that explains how Yaakov can marry two sisters, and I won't tell you more. So the Radbaz says it's Al Pi Kabbalah. Okay? So therefore I cannot reveal more than that because I really don't know what he's referring to. Okay? I will share with you an incredible soid that I think the Radbaz is being megala. The Radbaz, I think, is uncovering a little bit of the secret that the reason you're now to marry two sisters, why you're now to marry two sisters, what's wrong with marrying two sisters? The truth is that when one sister dies, you're allowed to marry the second sister. So why are you now to marry? It can't be so terrible. It's not like a different erva. It's not like a mother or a daughter, because it's bechayeha, aleha bechayeha. The answer is, you're now to use the scepter of the king. And if you look at the Navi Yechezkel, when it talks about the designs on the Kisei HaKavod, it says the designs are Isha el Achaisa. The designs on the Kisei HaKavod are called a woman and her sister. And therefore, you're now to make use of the scepter of the king. God's scepter and throne, so to speak, is described as two sisters. But Yaakov Avinu is on the Kisei HaKavod. He is the Kisei HaKavod. So Yaakov can marry two sisters. That's what the Radbaz says. Okay?
He was supposed to marry both sisters. He was supposed to marry Rachel, and then later, because Rachel was going to die. Of course, it got switched around. He had to marry her before, otherwise he would never been able to marry her if he waited.
Right, okay, so last year we had right? Yeah, we discussed that he could have married Rachel first. Rachel would have died, but it didn't work out like that. Okay, that's how the Radbaz is Masber the Rashba. Okay, get a load of this. Shitas Harama. Shitas Harama is Oyem V'Noira. Says the Ramah, how could Yaakov marry two sisters? Says Ramah, what's the problem? Whoever said Yaakov kept the whole Torah? Avram kept the Torah. Yitzchak didn't keep the Torah. Yaakov didn't keep the Torah. Amram didn't keep the Torah. Avram kept the Erev Tavshilin. It says, Malame, Akev Asher Shama, Avram B'Koili, not Yitzchak, not Yaakov. The Shita, the Ramah is, nobody kept the Torah but Avraham Avinu. That's Ramah.
Follow that they would.
What if the first sister
Logically, I would say that they did.
I would have said, what do you mean, who said? Yaakov said he kept the Torah. I'm Lavan Garti, V'Eichararota. Lavan Garti, Taryag Mitzvah Shamarti.
What if
Says,
barren, if the first sister's barren, what happens there?
Then can marry another wife. You can marry another wife. What?
You married the second one.
You have up to 18. Okay, if you're a king, and if you're not a king, you have endless. Ein l'davar soif. Okay. Rav Miller used to say, people got all hooked up about marrying their no, people always say, am I marrying my bashart? Bashart. Everyone's worried if they marry their bashart. So I would say, look, you're allowed to marry 18 wives, midaraisa, right? So chances are you got one of them. Chances are you got one out of that's. But Rav Miller used to mock. People worried, did I marry my bashart? He wasn't into that. Okay. Now the Maral says, also a very interesting idea. The Maral says the Avos kept those mitzvahs that were shaykh to them, that they had a special connection to, that they had a special, that their midah was similar to. So the opinion of the Maral is that Avram Avinu was the first of the Maminim. And since he was the first of the Maminim, Avram Avinu Taka kept Kol HaTorah Kula. But Yitzchak Avinu, what mitzvah do we find that Yitzchak kept? He tells Esav in this week. He tells Esav, pick up sana kelecha, tel yecha v'kashtecha, go shecht. The mitzvah that we find that Yitzchak was makbid on was shchita. Why was Yitzchak makbid on shchita? Shchita is like connected to midas hadin. Yitzchak's midah was midas hadin, so Yitzchak was specialized in shchita. What do we find that Yaakov Avinu kept? Shabbos. Because Yaakov has a special connection to Shabbos. The Gemara says, Kol hama'aniges ha-Shabbos, noisin loy nachala b'li mitzarim, loy k'mashenemar by Avram, kom hasalech ba'aretz la'arka l'rachba, v'loy k'mashenemar by Yitzchak, ela k'mashenemar l'Yaakov, that oz tisana gal Hashem, v'rkavticha abba masei oretz, v'ha'achalticha nachlas Yaakov avicha. That Shabbos is specifically connected to Yaakov Avinu. But then the Maral says the truth is they all kept all of them, but there was a special shmira on those mitzvahs that they had a specific connection to. There's another Maral, the Maral in the Gur Aryeh on Parshas Vayigash. The Maral answers this question very simply. How could Yaakov Avinu marry two sisters? How could Yaakov marry two sisters? Maral says, what's the problem? Yaakov was Jewish. Okay, maybe. Did he have to keep the Torah? He didn't have to keep the Torah. So he kept the Torah voluntarily, like a ger. Now that means we could look at the wives that Yaakov kept also as if they would be gerim. Now, if they were Gerim, he would be allowed to marry the two sisters. Because Gershon is Gayer, Kakat and Shanel Adami. When somebody converts, they're like a newborn person, and all previous relations fall away. And therefore, Yaakov Avinu was allowed to marry two sisters because the method with which he kept the Torah was as Gerim. And as Gerim, all korva falls away. And that's how Amram was able to marry his aunt. Amram also kept the Torah as a ger. That's the shita of the Maral in the Gur Aryeh, Parshas Vayigash. And then you have Reb Chaim Volozhiner, the Nefesh HaChaim. And Reb Chaim Volozhiner says, why in the world are the Avos keeping the Torah? God never told them to. So Reb Chaim Volozhiner says that aside from the fact that when you're Mekayim a mitzvah, you're fulfilling the command of Hashem, but even if Hashem did not command you specifically, mitzvahs are connected to all the upper olamos, all this, supernal worlds, all the upper worlds, all the olamos al yonim. And when you do a mitzvah, you create worlds, you're masakein worlds, you rectify worlds. And when you do an avero, you destroy worlds. So Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, despite the fact God never told them to do it, recognized the power of their maisim, recognized what their actions accomplish, and they kept the Torah in order to rectify various olamos. However, when they saw Baruch HaKodesh, that a greater tikkun would take place by not keeping a specific mitzvah. For instance, Yaakov Avinu realized that by marrying Rachel and Leah, he would create a Klal Yisrael, and that was more worthwhile than whatever tikkunim he was doing b'shamayim. He forgoed fulfilling that mitzvah for the sake of building Klal Yisrael. Now, we're not entitled to do that because we're commanded by Hashem specifically. But they weren't commanded, and therefore under their circumstances, where the tikkun that they would have achieved by violating was greater than by keeping, they let it slide. Okay, and finally, let's say over the explanation of the Briskarav, the Griz, very interesting Griz in Chidushei HaGriz on Parshas Lech Lecha. The Griz asked the famous question. We know Avram Avinu, the Griz, right, Rav Velvel, he asked the famous question. We know that Avram Avinu kept Kol HaTorah Kula. But there's one mitzvah that clearly Avram Avinu was very lax in, for at least, 99 years. For at least 90 years. And what was that? Bris Milah. Here he's an old man, and Hashem says to do a bris. Oh, he does a bris. Well, what's he waiting for? He sits in the sukkah, he ate matzah, he kept Kol HaTorah Kula. What's he wait? Why did he wait so long? Right? So then, he what? Okay, there are many answers to the question, right? There's a chabura, or the Mizrahi says that you can only do Gedola mitzvah isa, yasem yishena mitzvah isa. So all the other mitzvahs he did, and if Hashem would command him, he'll do it again. But Mila, you can only do it once. If you do it right? You can only do it once. But says the Brisker Rav, it's not even a question to begin with. Who do you do Mila to? Is there a mitzvah of Mila on a behema? No. What do you have to be to have a Mila? You have to be an Arel. So I would have thought an Arel is someone who has a foreskin. No, it's not true, says the Grizz. An Arel is someone who has a halachic Arel. How do you become a halachic Arel? When God gives the Torah to Klal Yisrael, and He says, circumcise an Arel, that creates a halachic status of an Arel, to whom you could do a Milah. But before the Torah is given, there's no such concept of the halachic status of an Arel. Milah, you can't do it. It's not, you could do the Milah, but you're not doing anything. Likewise, says the Brisker Rav, it says, Isha lachoisa loisikach. If you married a woman, you can't live with her sister. Yeah, if you married a woman. But before the Torah is given, there's no concept of Kiddushin. You can't marry a woman. That concept of Kiddushin was created with the giving of the Torah. Memela, Yaakov Avinu didn't marry two sisters, no such thing as marriage. The Yisr is don't live with a woman after you've married their sister. There's no Kiddush, there's no Chalois Kiddushin before the Torah was given. Now, does this assume that the Kiddushin that Yaakov Avinu gave to Leah was not a Kiddushin? I guess so. Does that mean Yaakov Avinu was not a Yisrael? L'chara, he was a Yisrael, even if he was a Yisrael, but it doesn't mean he necessarily had Kedushas, Kedushin. That being the case, says the Brisker Rav, Yaakov Avinu was allowed to marry two sisters. So let's go through some of the Shitas very quickly. You have Rashi, who takes everything literally, like the Gemara, that literally the Avos kept everything. The Radak learns, no, they only kept the Zayin Mitzvos. The Ramban learns they only kept the Torah in Eretz Yisrael. The Dasakanim says they only kept what they wanted to keep. The Rashba says a Kabbalistic pshat. The Radbaz says Yaakov Avinu is the Kisei HaKavod. He's the Kisei HaKavod, you can live with two sisters. The Ramah learns only Avram kept the Torah. Nobody else kept the Torah. The Maral says they specifically kept those mitzvahs that were applicable to them and connected to their Sharish HaNeshama. The Nefesh HaChaim says they kept mitzvahs so long as ultimately that would bring about the greatest tikkun, but if their violation would bring about a greater tikkun, then they took that path instead. And the Brisker Rav says, specifically when it comes to marrying sisters, it's dependent on Jewish marriage, which was not invented and created until the Torah was given. But the good news is that we live in an era after the Torah was given. So we have to keep all 613 mitzvahs, and Rebbe Shem should give us all siyata d'shmaya, lilmoid ulalamed, lishmar v'lasay shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.